One of the most underrated meta decks this format has got to be Mathmech. I don't see a lot of people on this deck, and I honestly think this deck is insane. I'm going to be going over the deck profile of the pure Mathmech deck that I went 4-0 with in the very first Power of the Elements tournament that I played. And I'm going to be going over exactly what I played, but also talking about some other card choices now that I've had some experience playing in the format. I'm going to talk about some other card choices that you can swap out for some of the cards. So yeah, if you guys enjoy this type of content, please do me a huge favor, leave a like and subscribe because it really helps keep me motivated to keep posting more videos like this. But with that being said, let's just hop straight into the deck profile. So starting off with the Mathmechs, of course, triple Mathmech Circular, best card in the deck. This card is just, honest, does everything for you. You always want access to it. It's triple diameter as well. You definitely want to play 3. Yes, it's strictly a normal summon. For the most part, but even if you do something like normal Mathmech summon diameter summon extender, it's still really good because it turns your XYZ into an Omni Negate, which at the very worst becomes like a pseudo call by the grave if they try to hand trap your XYZ, or later on if you keep it on the board, you're able to play through Nibiru a lot better because Mathmech Circular does force you to summon a lot of times. Diameter, definitely one of the best cards in the deck. You definitely have to max out on it. For the Mathmech extenders, 3 addition, 3 subtraction. This is pretty standard. You always want to see Mathmechs. This is really good because just putting bodies on the board helps you make those rank 4s and also those link plays. So yeah, maxing out on those. And I'm also maxing out on Mathmech Sigma or Sigma Grind Set. This one is usually played at 2 in a lot of people's decks, but I really like it at 3. Just because I love having the idea of extra extenders in this deck. No, this card is not strictly a normal summon in the hand because you can actually summon it from hand with the same condition that as if it was in the graveyard, which means one, it's like the best discard off of something like Silent Mining, but also it turns something like Sigma plus an extender into your regular combo because you can just normal Sigma, summon your extender, make your Alan Burchin, and then once this hits the graveyard, you still have an extra extender in that as well. So yeah, I really like this card at 3. I really don't see why you would only play 2. I just think you need as many Mathmech names as possible because if you're not starting with Circular, your combos are mostly going to be 2-card combos, so you always want to see a combination of them. So that's it for the Mathmech monsters. 3 copies of Silent Mining as well. You do need to play this to search out your Circular or your other Mathmech extenders. I really don't like this card. You are losing a lot of value off of it every time. Like the only really good discard in this deck is Sigma, like I mentioned, but you still need to play it just for extra consistency. For the Mathmech spells or traps, I played 1 equation, 1 induction, 1 super factorial. So I'm gonna explain more about the 1 super factorial later on. But 1 equation is pretty standard. You definitely want to play this. It helps you go second a lot easier. It just gives you that extra extender, which can be huge. Mathmech induction was my out to Mystic Mine. So not only is it searchable, but like I said, out to Mystic Mine, but also spot removal. In this format is actually incredibly powerful. So against something like Sprite, if you remove their monster on board, it makes it very hard for them to extend. Same thing with like a lot of other decks as well. But yeah, worst case, it was just the Mystic Mine out. It also allowed me to search an extra trap if for some reason like I already drew the super factorial or had access to it, or I already burned through my Laplation at that point. So yeah, it never really came up. But so in theory, like you could play something like Harpy's Feather Duster over this instead, but I chose to go with this card instead. Yeah, like I said, I'm gonna explain why I was only playing 1 super factorial at the very end of the profile, so stay tuned for that. And then 3 Parallel Exceed. This card is incredibly powerful because it also gives you more ways to combo with like any Mathmech. So even like normal summoning a subtraction or an addition, which is normally really bad, allows you to full combo with Parallel Exceed. Just because Parallel Exceed gets you 2 level 4 bodies, meaning you get access to Alan Burchin or you get access to Link plays. This card is honestly insane. I really like this card. I really think you probably want to play 3. You definitely want to see it. The only time like it is really bad is like if you don't see any Cybruses, because I don't play Almirage, which I'll also explain once I get into the extra deck. And then for the hand traps, 3 Ash, 3 Crow, 3 Imperm. These are all pretty standard. Like these don't really need explanation. These are probably the best hand traps in the format, the most generic ones that offer the most coverage. That's what I wanted for this deck. Of course, if you're also playing something like Heat Soul, like I am, you want to play hand traps that are really good to draw. So like cards like Gamma aren't the best. I know Imperm kind of falls in that category, but I like Imperm because you're also able to draw it as your 6th card, and it'll be really good. And then I played 3 Ghost Bell for the 12th hand traps. Ghost Bell is really good against the Chillman matchup as well. It essentially serves as extra copies of DD Crow. Against the Sprite matchup as well, going second, it can stop Sprite Elf from bringing back the extra Toad. Or if they only have 1 Frog in the graveyard, you can bell the Ronin Toad in so it can't bring out another Frog, and that can stop Toad from coming out in the first place, which can be incredibly powerful. But also something like Ghost Bell and Haunted Mansion stops a card like DD Crow, which is incredibly powerful this format. And DD Crow is one of like the only counters to your Super Factorial trap. Because if they just DD Crow the diameter, their trap essentially just becomes useless. It doesn't really do anything. So you want to prevent cards like DD Crow, Call by the Grave, stuff like that from hitting your stuff out of the graveyard. And that's why I elected for Ghost Bell as well. So not only is it a pretty decent hand trap at stopping your opponent, but it also kind of acts as pseudo Call by the Graves against DD Crow, which is actually pretty high impact against the trap card. So yeah, I just wanted to protect the trap card with the Ghost Bell. Of course, 1 Call by the Grave, pretty standard. And then the last 3 cards I played, this is what I played for the tournament. But these are cards, now that looking back, I definitely should have swapped with something else. Of course, the double Ghost Circle was just for the extra hand traps, so I would draw them more often. But Mathmech Nabla was in my deck because I wanted to have access to the 1-card circular spell or trap search. If you guys don't know that combo, stay tuned for the full Mathmech guide, which will be coming out after this video. I'm going to be going over the crazy combos you can do with circular. Just off of circular alone, you can search any spell or trap in the game, which is honestly insane, and you do have to play a Nabla for that. But aside from that, I figured Nabla was just like an extra diameter, because I can normal attribute summon diameter from the deck, and it's like the same idea. But in practice, like I never drew it, like I never ended up needing to search it. So I decided in the future I'm going to cut these 2 for Desires and play a extra copy of Super Factorial. So 1, you have a better chance of seeing it more often, but also prevents the risk of banishing it with Desires. This deck did have some consistency issues when I was playing it. So I definitely feel like the Desires would have helped a lot. Just being able to draw 2 cards. You have a lot of 3 of them in this deck. Aside, like the only really important one you don't ever want to banish is like Super Factorial, which is why bumping this up to 2, replacing this with Super Factorial would be really good. So yeah, those are the cards I would play over these 3. That's it for the main deck. 40 cards. I think you absolutely need to play 40 in this deck. Keep it as streamlined as possible. Now for the extra deck, I am only playing 1 copy of Inflation. This was kind of weird. A lot of decks play 2. Well, obviously I only played 1 because I only played 1 Super Factorial in my deck for the tournament. But now that I put the second Super Factorial, I still would consider only ever playing 1, because my theory is once you Super Factorial them once and Inflation them once, you're probably just gonna kill them next turn. With like your Cyber's access code talker play, so you don't really need the second one. The second one rarely ever comes up. The only time I could think where reasonably the second one would come up is where you're going second and you have to make Laplation to break their board and then set up Super Factorial as a trap afterwards. But I also figured I could search something like Induction in that case, where it would still be an interruption, obviously not as good, but it would make it so I have extra room in my extra deck to play something else. So yeah, 1 Laplation, I'll tell you what you guys can cut for the second one if you want. But yeah, you definitely need 2 Allen Burstyn. 2 Allen Burstyn comes up all the time. You do 1 in your regular combo, and if your Super Factorial target gets DD Crowed, like you're forced to make this instead, so you definitely need the second one. But the second one also just comes up. It's just an incredibly good card. The card I was playing over the second Laplation was Mathmech Magma. So for what this card does is when it destroys a monster by battle, you can target up to 2 cards your opponent controls and destroy them. And if this card is destroyed by battle or a card effect, you can add a Mathmech or trap from your deck to your hand. And of course, it's just a generic level 8 synchro. So my theory with this was going into like the Sprite board. This is bigger than like all their monsters, and it punishes them super hard if they don't play Dupe Frog, because you can just beat over the Toad and then pop like 2 of their cards. It's just really good. It also makes it so you don't have to commit your Access Go Talker to breaking their board after you Dark Ruler them. And that was really important in my opinion, because since you're not killing them with Access Go Talker, I still wanted a card that would be able to clear a lot of the cards on their board. So that's what Magma fulfilled. So Magma was very easy to make. Off of just a single circular, you dump Sigma, summon back Sigma, circular, search a spell or trap, and then synchro into this. And then you essentially trade with 3 cards from your opponent. And if your opponent has something to like destroy this, then well, you also get a Mathmech spell or trap. So that was my logic with this card. I really couldn't find anything else in the extra deck to cut for the second Laplacian. I do want to play the second Laplacian, but it also didn't come up in the tournament where I ever felt like, oh, I lost the game because I didn't have a second Laplacian. It just didn't come up that often. But yeah, Yugioh Mathmech, let me know what you guys think in the comment section below. I know this is not very standard at all. Some people might play like the Synchro 12, but I really don't like it because it doesn't do anything. It doesn't actually help clear your opponent's board like this does. It's just big and like annoying to kill but every deck has an out to it pretty much aside from like Fluonderies. So it's not really worth just trying to sit on that. Like in the Adding Nister deck, it's a little better because your towers is bigger, but when your towers is only 3,000, it's just not that great. And like I mentioned, this actually helps clear your opponent's board under something like Dark Ruler and allows you to save your Axis Code Talker. For the other links, Link Disciple, Link Devotee, this is something I wanted to cut just because it takes up so much space in the extra deck and prevents you from making Heat Soul turn 1. But throughout testing, like I found that it came up a lot. Just the fact that it always guarantees you a follow-up play with Cyber's Wicked, Searching Diameter, and then allows you to set up just extra bodies on the board for like IP Masquerena. I decided in the end I was going to keep it in the deck. I was thinking of cutting these two and just trying to go for Cyber's Wicked into Axis Go or Heat Soul turn 1 and just play like Heat Soul instead of IP Masquerena. Because the thing with Masquerena is it loses the cards like Dark Ruler, it loses the cards like Imperm, loses the cards like Super Polymerization for Garura. So that's something that I wanted to avoid if possible. So in the future I may end up cutting it, but from my experience in this tournament, these were incredibly good and IP Masquerena board was pretty decent. The other link one is one copy of Lingaribo. I wanted to play Samurai Almirage in this slot because all of the Mathmechs, aside from Circular, are all just 1,000 attacks. So if you normal summon them, you can make Almirage. Almirage is a Cyberse, and you can trigger your Parallel Exceed that way. But also, Almirage allows you to use cards like Ash Blossom, DD Crow, and Ghost Bell for it. And that's kind of something I wanted to do just because I didn't want to brick on like hands of like just hand traps and Parallel Exceed and not be able to do anything. In the end, I went with Lingaribo. A couple of reasons for that. One, there are times where you need to trigger Cyber's Wicked after you go into your Devotee play, and you need to turn that token into a Lingaribo just to trigger it, and you unfortunately can't turn the token into an Almirage. But also, the other reason, I figured Lingaribo's effect can actually be pretty relevant going second into something like the Tearlament board, because as soon as you summon one monster, they're probably not going to use something like Shulik or Mana Noise on it. They're going to try to wait for you to commit more onto the board. And if you just turn Lingaribo right away into that, it makes it so your opponent has to play a little more awkwardly in order to actually bait out the Lingaribo. And something like Predator Plant, Dragostopelia doesn't even work on it because it tributes itself for cost. So you'll be able to negate the trap anyways. And the Predator counter doesn't matter because it'll be off the board. So that's something I really wanted to do Lingaribo for. It came up once where I needed to turn the token under Cyber's Wicked into Lingaribo. But in the future, like I would really want to test out Almirage just so I never brick with this deck. So if I open a handful of Parallel Exceeds and hand traps, I'd still be able to play. For the Link 2, Cyber's Wicked, this card is insane. 3 out of the 5 Cyber tuners in the game currently are all Mathmech cards. So essentially, this is just like a Mathmech searcher. Its effect is also pretty relevant, protecting itself and things it points to from card effects. So going second into something like Sprite, it makes it so their Toad is a lot less impactful of an interruption, just because your opponent can't like destroy any of the cards it points to. It's incredibly powerful, and of course, it always grabs you follow up. You can like summon the monsters off of Super Factorial under it, and then make Laplacian, and then you get another search on your opponent's turn as well. So very powerful card. One copy of Splash Mage. I wanted to play 2 copies of this as well, just because Splash Mage essentially is like the bridge in every Cyber's extra deck to like either make Axis Code or to make Heat Soul. And I always wanted a second one just in case the games got that grindy. But in the end, I cut this. I didn't realize I didn't need it. One was more than enough because your turn 1 combo doesn't need it. One copy of Update Jammer. Update Jammer is really good. You definitely need it because Circular does lock you into only attacking with 1 monster, and otherwise your Mathmech Circular isn't a 1-card OTK if you don't play this card in your extra deck. It came up quite a few times. Definitely like Update Jammer into Axis Code is like the easiest way that any Cyber's deck just kills your opponent, and that's why I decided to play it. It's a really good card. IP Masquerena. like I mentioned before when I was talking about like the Link Disciple stuff, I wanted to initially cut this, so like cut this, the Link Disciple, Link Devotee, play Lingeribo, play Almirage, play a second Laplacian, and then play like a second Splash Mage over the links that I'm talking about right here. That's just because of the reasons that I mentioned. Like, it just makes it so your board loses to those board breakers a little harder. Normally the Mathmech board doesn't really lose to that, because the Mathmech board turn 1 is just always guaranteeing the trap, which is super high impact, and then playing for follow-up with a bunch of hand advantage. So essentially, if you guys don't like the IP Masquerena route, I would recommend you can just play like a Heat Soul turn 1 kind of thing. Try to draw into a bunch of hand traps, set up your Super Factorial play so you have an interruption, because Super Factorial on its own can just be enough a lot of the times. And then you can cut like Disciple Devotee for something like Almirage, extra copies of Laplacian. You can even play the Synchro if you want, just so you have options in your extra deck. I didn't really, I found that it was like okay. A lot of times it definitely helps make your end board a lot more threatening than if it was just Heat Soul. And I didn't have any board breakers played into me, because I think that's only really relevant game 1. A lot of the times people aren't going to side board breakers against Mathmech post game 1, because it doesn't really make sense to. So yeah, IP Masquerena is definitely a very interesting card. You have easy access to it in this deck because it is a Cyberse, so something to consider if you don't want to play that. Deco Talker Heat Soul, you definitely want to play this. It helps you so much with after breaking your opponent's board. You can just make a Splash Mage into this, and then you draw into card advantage while maintaining like control of the board with something like Super Factorial. 1 copy of Transco Talker, it's generic Cyberse good stuff, helps you link climb, and it's just really good recovery. And then the Appaloosa for the copy of IP Masquerena. This is what you go into. You could play Avermax instead, but I don't think Avermax is the best, because the decks just have outs to it. Like, it's not like impossible to out for most decks, so like it's like something you can consider for sure, but I feel like Appaloosa actually putting up interruptions is just more important. And then of course, Access Code Talker, probably one of the best cards in the extra deck, just helps you OTK. So that's it for the extra deck. I'm just gonna quickly go over my side deck. Of course, this is subject to change depending on how the format changes, but this is what I played for the tournament. So 3 copies of Dark Ruler No More, 3 copies of Nibiru, board breakers. I wanted to side Nibiru because I still think it's a great card. I just didn't want to risk running into Sprite and having it be dead game 1, just because winning that game 1 is super important, and especially if you're going second, it makes it a lot more difficult, especially if you have just like a dead Nibiru in your hand. So yeah, that's it for the going second, like against the combo decks. Against the trap decks, Harpy's Feather Duster, Reboot, Triple Cosmic. I wanted to sort of respect back row decks, just because it was early in the format. People could still be playing weird stuff in their deck. So I figured 5 was pretty good. And then for the traps, I played 3 D-Barrier and 1 Summon Limit. So the 1 Summon Limit was because you have access to a searchable Speller Trap off of Alimbertian, and I figured Summon Limit was the best against every single deck out there aside from like Eldritch. So like, even against something like Fluandries, they won't ever be able to Tribute Summon. Of course, against like every other deck out there, 2 summons is like not enough. They can't do anything under it, and this would honestly just win you the game a lot of the times when you're going first. So I kind of wanted this to be like a quote-unquote FDK. That was searchable in this deck, which is also why like I wanted to play the Nabla in the deck, because just having access to Circular getting into this is just honestly insane. I played 3D Barrier. This was kind of like a rush decision. I didn't have too much time to prepare for the tournament. My theory with this was it would be able to stop Tearlament really well, of course. It'd also be decent into the Sprite matchup, because stopping XYZs makes it so all they can do is like summon access code really, or set up like their small little negates with like with their copy of Red or Carrot, and I figured that wasn't too bad. Of course, it's never gonna like completely shut them out like it does Tearlament, so in the future I may consider something like Rivalry of Warlords. Rivalry of Warlords is really good because you're of course only playing Cyberse, but the problem I have with Rivalry is it's also like similar in the sense to D-Barrier, because your opponent can always do something. So like in Tearlament matchup, they can always set up Kikalos plus like a trap at the very worst. Your opponent in Sprite can always set up like their little guys plus like smashers and stuff like that. So Rivalry wasn't perfect either. I just figured D-Barrier was like the most generic one and the one that would hit the most things. And yeah, that's gonna do it for the side deck. That was it for the deck profile. Let me know what you guys thought about it in the comment section below. If you liked it, do stay tuned for the full Mathmech guides. I'm gonna be going over combos, things to know, interactions you need to know, like other like hidden things about this deck that a lot of people aren't aware of. So do stay tuned for that. It's coming out right after this video. But with that being said, I hope you guys enjoyed the video, and I will see you guys in the next one. Take care.